Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, why am I still here? Why, after 65 years, do I still have breath in my lungs when so many others have already gone? Is it just a coincidence? Or is there a divine purpose for your life that you haven't yet discovered? In this moment, I invite you to pause and reflect, because what I'm about to share with you might just change everything. You see, if you're still alive, there's a reason. God has a purpose for you, a calling that only you can fulfill, and it's never too late to embrace it. Stick with me as we explore this powerful truth and uncover why your greatest and most impactful chapter could be ahead of you. Trust me, this message will speak directly to your heart. Don't miss it. Pope Leo XIV, in his profound wisdom, challenges us to stop and truly consider why God has kept us alive beyond the age of 65. It's a question that may stir up feelings of doubt, fear, or even frustration, especially when the years have weighed heavily on your body and soul. But Pope Leo XIV reminds us that it's not by chance or coincidence that you are still here. No, it's because there is a divine calling placed on your life, one that only you can fulfill. We often look at the years gone by and wonder if our time has passed, if there's nothing more to give. The days may feel repetitive, the nights endless, and the weight of lost loved ones or broken dreams may cloud your vision. You might feel like an afterthought, wondering if God has forgotten you. But what if, just what if, your greatest purpose is still ahead of you? Pope Leo XIV urges us to understand that age does not diminish God's calling on our lives. In fact, as we grow older, our lives are like fine wine, becoming richer, deeper, and more meaningful with each passing year. Our wisdom, our experiences, and our faith can serve as beacons to those around us. The idea that our greatest chapter is yet to be written is not just hopeful thinking, it is a divine truth. Think of the many examples from Scripture. Moses, called by God at the age of 80 to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Caleb, 85 years old, still strong in faith and ready to claim the promised land. And even Zechariah and Elizabeth, elderly and childless, who were chosen by God to bring forth the forerunner of the Messiah. God does not overlook the elderly. He calls them, sustains them, and empowers them to do great things. So why are you still here after 65? Because you have a unique purpose, a mission that only you can accomplish. As long as you have breath in your lungs, God is not finished with you. Your life is a living testimony to His grace and His unshakable faithfulness. God sees you, not as the world does, but as a vessel of His love, strength, and purpose. If you are still here, it's because God has a plan for you. A plan that might involve sharing your wisdom with the younger generation, offering comfort to those who are weary, or using your prayers to move mountains. Your calling has not expired. In fact, it may just be beginning. Pope Leo XIV's message is a reminder that we should never underestimate the power and purpose of our later years. No matter how difficult life may seem, no matter how many challenges we face, our lives are still meaningful, still necessary. God has preserved us for a reason, and it's time to embrace that purpose with both faith and excitement. So ask yourself, what is the divine mission that God is calling me to fulfill? What can I offer to this world in this season of my life? And know this, God is not finished with you yet. You are here for a reason. Embrace that purpose and watch how your life can continue to bear fruit for His kingdom. For those of you who may be feeling weary, lonely, or diminished by age, I have a message that I hope will stir your heart and breathe new life into your spirit. If the years have left you feeling like you've been forgotten, or that your time has passed, I want you to hear this loud and clear. God is not finished with you yet. Your life has not reached its final chapter. In fact, the most profound and impactful part of your journey might still be ahead of you. Pope Leo XIV speaks directly to those who feel overlooked or discarded by the world because of their age. He understands the heaviness that comes with the passage of time, the aches in the body, the loss of loved ones, the silence of an empty home. He acknowledges how easy it is to feel like you've done everything you were meant to do, that perhaps your best years are behind you. But he urges you not to lose hope. This message is for you, and it is a message of deep encouragement and divine purpose. You see, the world may tell you that as you age, you become less valuable, that your time to make a difference has passed. But that's not how God sees you. In fact, God often does His most remarkable work through those who have endured many years and experienced a lifetime of trials and triumphs. Your experiences, your wisdom, and your faith are more precious now than ever before. They are gifts that God has entrusted to you, and He still has a plan for you to fulfill, no matter your age. The days may seem long, and the nights even longer. Perhaps the faces you once knew are no longer around, and the dreams you once had seemed far out of reach. But take heart, For God sees you, He hears your prayers, and He has not forgotten you. He is still speaking to your heart, calling you to a greater purpose. Just like in the stories of Moses, Caleb, and Zechariah, God calls those in their later years to accomplish things that are nothing short of extraordinary. Pope Leo XIV reminds us that the greatest chapter of our lives is not necessarily the one that came in our youth, but the one we are living now. Your years have not dulled your ability to make an impact on the world. In fact, they have refined you, made you stronger, and prepared you for a work that only someone with your life experiences can accomplish. Consider the example of Lucia Benedicti, the 82-year-old widow Pope Leo XIV mentions. Living alone in a small cottage, Lucia might seem like someone who has passed her time, someone whose life is fading away. But in truth, her life was full of purpose and meaning. Every day, she spent her time in prayer for the lost, for her community, for those in need. Through her quiet devotion, she touched lives in ways no one could have imagined. One day, a young man, broken by life, knocked on her door. Lucia welcomed him with love, offering him hope and guidance, and he turned his life around. It was then that Pope Leo XIV realized that Lucia's purpose was far from over. She had more to offer, more souls to touch, more prayers to lift, and more love to give. This is the truth I want you to remember. As long as you have breath in your lungs, your life is a living testimony to God's grace. Your prayers, your wisdom, and your heart can still bring hope and healing to the world around you. Whether it's through a kind word, a thoughtful gesture, or a prayer lifted for those in need, your life is making a difference. God's calling does not fade with age. It only grows more refined, more intentional, and more powerful. So, do not look at your years as a limitation. See them as an opportunity, a precious gift from God to continue fulfilling His purpose for your life. Your best chapter is not behind you. It is ahead of you, waiting to be written. Take this message to heart. God is not finished with you yet. Your story is still being written, and the impact you will have is still to come. So, rise up, take courage, and step boldly into the divine calling that God has placed on your life. You have much to give, and this world still needs you. Let me share with you the incredible story of Lucia Benedicti, a woman whose life demonstrates how God can use the elderly for His divine purposes in the most unexpected and powerful ways. Lucia was 82 years old when Pope Leo XIV first met her. Living alone in a small, modest stone cottage nestled in the quiet hills of Italy, Lucia's life was marked by solitude and silence. The loss of her husband many years earlier, and the absence of children or close family, made her life one of quiet isolation. Most people would look at her and assume that her best years were far behind her, that she was simply waiting out the remainder of her days in peace. But to see her in that way would be to completely miss the extraordinary purpose God had for her life. Every morning, before the first light of dawn, Lucia would rise and kneel in prayer. In the stillness of her small home, she would pray not only for herself but for her village, for the lost souls around her, for priests burdened by temptation, and for the young people who seemed to be walking aimlessly through life. Despite her own loneliness, she poured out her heart for others. She offered her solitude as a living sacrifice, believing that God could still use her, no matter her age, no matter her circumstances. One afternoon, a young man, broken and desperate, came to Lucia's door. He had been lost in life, torn by hardship and hopelessness. When he knocked, Lucia welcomed him with the warmth of Christ's love. She offered him a gentle smile, a cup of tea, and words that seemed to carry eternity with them. Her simple acts of kindness, her quiet prayers, and her unwavering faith became the lifeline that this young man needed. Through her compassion, he found repentance, healing, and ultimately a return to Christ. It was then that Pope Leo XIV understood something profound. Lucia was not alive by accident. She was still here for a divine reason. God had preserved her life to reach just one more soul, a soul that needed her prayer, her love, and her wisdom. This encounter was not a random event, but a clear sign that God was using her, despite her age, as a vessel for His work. Lucia's story is a powerful example of how God uses the elderly for His purposes in ways that the world may overlook. Society may view older individuals as less significant, as people who are fading away with time. But in God's eyes, the elderly are often some of His most vital instruments. Their lives, filled with years of wisdom and prayer, have the power to shape the future in ways we cannot always see. Lucia's prayers and sacrifices, her willingness to offer her life to God, became the key to someone else's redemption. This story of Lucia reminds us that our age does not determine our usefulness in God's eyes. Whether we are young or old, God has a unique purpose for each of us. Lucia, in her quiet, humble existence, became a beacon of light in a world that often overlooks the elderly. Through prayer and sacrifice, she remained a vital force in her community, showing that God can use us, no matter our age, to bring His light to the world. So, let Lucia's example inspire you. If you find yourself in a season of life where you feel forgotten or your purpose seems unclear, remember that God sees you. Your prayers, your life, your sacrifices, no matter how small or quiet, are never in vain. Just like Lucia, you are still alive because God has a divine mission for you to fulfill. Let us turn our attention to some of the most powerful stories in the Bible, where God called individuals in their later years to accomplish tasks that would shape the course of history. These biblical examples of Moses, Caleb, and Zechariah serve as powerful reminders that age does not diminish one's calling, but rather, it can enhance the purpose God has for our lives. Take Moses, for example. At 80 years old, Moses was living a quiet, unremarkable life as a shepherd in the desert. He had once been a prince of Egypt, but now he was far from that world, living in exile, far removed from the grandeur of his youth. He had made mistakes, failed in ways he couldn't undo, and likely thought his greatest days were behind him. Yet, it was at this stage in his life that God spoke to Moses from a burning bush, calling him to return to Egypt to lead the Israelites out of slavery. Moses, full of self-doubt and fear, protested. "Who am I?" he asked, questioning his ability to fulfill such a monumental task. At 80, with years of failure and weariness weighing heavily on him, Moses believed his strength was gone. But God responded with unwavering assurance, "I will be with you." The age of Moses was not a barrier, it was part of God's divine plan. God didn't see Moses as the broken man he saw in the mirror. Instead, God saw him as a chosen vessel, ready to accomplish a mission that would forever change the destiny of the Israelites. Then there is Caleb. At 85 years old, Caleb stood before Joshua, declaring, "I am still as strong today as I was the day Moses sent me." Caleb's vigor and strength were not the result of youthful energy, but were instead rooted in his steadfast faith. He had spent 40 years wandering the wilderness, watching his peers die in doubt and fear, yet he clung to God's promises. While others around him saw only obstacles and giants, Caleb saw opportunity. At 85, he didn't seek rest. He sought to claim his promised land, to conquer the mountain of Hebron, which was inhabited by fierce enemies. His faith was as strong as ever, and his calling to fulfill God's promises did not fade with age. Moses and Caleb are shining examples of how God uses those in their later years to accomplish tasks that no one else could. Their age was not a limitation but a refinement, a process through which their faith and resilience grew stronger. God called them not because they were youthful or strong in the conventional sense, but because of their unwavering trust in His power, their endurance, and the wisdom they had accumulated over a lifetime of challenges. Consider also the story of Zechariah and Elizabeth, an elderly couple who had longed for a child but remained childless well into their old age. In a culture where barrenness was often seen as a sign of divine disfavor, their hearts had likely grown heavy with unanswered prayers. Yet it was in their old age that God chose to answer their prayers and fulfill His promise. When Zechariah, serving as a priest in the temple, was visited by an angel, he was told that he and Elizabeth would bear a son, the forerunner of the Messiah, John the Baptist. The waiting had been long, the hope seemingly dashed, but God had a plan, and His timing was perfect. Zechariah and Elizabeth's story teaches us that God's calling is not limited by age or perceived timing. While they had spent many years in silence, feeling the weight of unfulfilled promises, God was at work, preparing them for a significant role in His eternal plan. When the time came, their faith and perseverance were rewarded in the most extraordinary way. These stories remind us that God's call does not diminish with age. Rather, it deepens and strengthens. Moses, Caleb, and Zechariah are living testaments to the truth that age is not a barrier to God's work. In fact, the years often provide us with the strength, wisdom, and faith necessary to accomplish tasks that we could not have undertaken in our younger years. God sees us not for our age, but for our hearts. Just as He called Moses at 80, Caleb at 85, and Zechariah and Elizabeth in their old age, He calls us at every stage of life. No matter how old we are, God still has a purpose for us to fulfill, a divine mission that is uniquely ours to carry out. So whether you are in your youth or your later years, remember this: your age does not limit your purpose. As long as you have breath in your lungs, God is not finished with you. Just as He called these remarkable individuals in the Bible to accomplish incredible things, He is still calling you to do the same. Trust in His plan, lean on His promises, and know that your calling is not defined by age, but by your willingness to serve Him faithfully. In the quiet moments of life, when the world around us seems silent and still, we may feel as though our prayers go unanswered, our faith unfulfilled. Yet, it is precisely in these moments of silence that God is often at work, preparing us for greater purposes. Pope Leo XIV speaks powerfully about the strength of faith that endures through time, and how God's silence, though often difficult to understand, serves as a crucible in which our faith is refined and strengthened. Consider the example of Caleb, a man whose faith was tested over the course of many decades. Caleb, who stood at 85 years old, is a shining example of unwavering trust in God's promises. When Caleb was a young man, he was one of the 12 spies sent by Moses to scout the Promised Land. The other spies returned with fearful reports of giants and insurmountable obstacles. But Caleb and Joshua were different. They saw the land not as a place of danger, but as a land of opportunity, a land where God's promises would be fulfilled. For 40 years, Caleb wandered in the wilderness with the Israelites, watching as the older generation perished due to their lack of faith. He had to endure the silence of God's promises, seeing the fulfillment of those promises delayed again and again. Yet, Caleb's faith never wavered. He trusted in God's word and believed that the land was theirs to claim, even when the rest of his peers doubted. At 85 years old, after decades of wandering and waiting, Caleb stood before Joshua and declared, "I am still as strong today as I was the day Moses sent me." Caleb was not referring to his physical strength alone, but to the strength of his spirit, a spirit forged in the silence of waiting and refined through years of trusting in God. His faith had endured through the silence, through the waiting, through the trials of life, and now, at the appointed time, God was preparing to fulfill His promises to Caleb. What can we learn from Caleb's story? We learn that silence is not the absence of God's presence, but rather the preparation for something greater. In those long years of waiting, Caleb's faith was being sharpened. His trust in God's promises was deepened, and his spiritual strength was tested and proven. It was in the silence that Caleb was prepared to claim his inheritance and step into the destiny God had for him. This is often the pattern in our own lives as well. When we find ourselves in seasons of silence, when our prayers seem to go unanswered, when the promises of God feel distant, it is easy to feel forgotten or abandoned. But Pope Leo XIV reminds us that this silence is not an indication of God's neglect. On the contrary, it is often during these quiet seasons that God is at work, shaping us, preparing us, and refining our faith. The silence of God can be uncomfortable, but it is not pointless. God uses these times to refine our character, to strengthen our trust in Him, and to prepare us for the greater tasks He has ahead. Just as Caleb's faith grew stronger with each passing year of waiting, so too can our faith deepen in times of silence. God's silence is not a denial of His promises, but an invitation to grow in trust and dependence on Him. Pope Leo XIV encourages us to embrace these silent moments as opportunities for spiritual growth. Like Caleb, we are called to remain steadfast in our faith, trusting that God's timing is perfect and His promises are sure. Though the journey may be long and filled with waiting, we can be confident that God is using the silence to prepare us for a purpose far greater than we could imagine. In your own life, when faced with silence, remember that God is not absent. He is working in the quiet, preparing you for something extraordinary. Just as Caleb's faith was refined in the wilderness, your faith is being refined in your moments of silence. Trust in God's plan, knowing that He is always at work, even when you cannot see it. The silence is not the end. It is the beginning of something beautiful, something greater than you could have imagined. So, as you wait, as you trust, let your faith endure through the silence. Like Caleb, know that your time will come. The promises of God are always worth the wait. And when the time is right, He will call you to step into your destiny, strengthened by the faith that has been tested and proven through the silence. In the later stages of life, when the burdens of years weigh heavily upon us, we often face challenges that seem insurmountable. Yet, Pope Leo XIV speaks powerfully about the restorative power of faith through suffering, urging us to understand that even in our hardest moments, God can bring renewal and purpose. He draws upon the stories of two biblical figures, Job and Elijah, both of whom, despite their intense suffering, found restoration and strength through their faith in God. Let us first consider the story of Job, a man who faced unimaginable suffering. Job was a man who had it all: wealth, health, a loving family, and a life of peace. But in the blink of an eye, everything was taken from him. His wealth vanished, his children died, and his health deteriorated. In the midst of his suffering, Job's friends came to him, offering their opinions on why he had fallen from grace. Yet, despite their accusations and the weight of his trials, Job never cursed God. Instead, he clung to his faith, even in the deepest darkness. In his agony, Job questioned everything. He wanted to understand why this was happening to him, why the righteous were made to suffer. But through it all, he never abandoned his faith. In the end, God spoke to Job, revealing the vastness of his wisdom and the mystery of his plan. Job's restoration came not by reclaiming his past life, but through the transformation of his spirit. God restored to him what he had lost, his wealth, his health, and his family. But more importantly, Job emerged from his suffering with a deeper understanding of God's sovereignty and an even stronger faith. Job's story teaches us that, even in our greatest trials, there is a purpose to our suffering. Through it, we are refined and made stronger. Similarly, the story of Elijah offers us a profound lesson in the power of faith through suffering and the courage to rise again. Elijah, a great prophet of God, had witnessed incredible miracles and victories. He called fire down from heaven, defeated the prophets of Baal, and stood as a mighty servant of God. Yet, despite his triumphs, Elijah faced a deep, personal crisis. When Queen Jezebel threatened his life, Elijah fled into the wilderness, overwhelmed by despair and fear. He sat under a broom tree, pleading for death, convinced that his mission had failed and that he was beyond hope. But God did not abandon Elijah in his despair. In the quiet of his loneliness, God sent an angel to minister to him, providing food and drink and urging him to rest. Then, God spoke to Elijah in a still, small voice, not in the raging wind, the earthquake, or the fire, but in the gentleness of a whisper. It was in that moment of silence that Elijah found his renewal. God didn't condemn him for his despair, but lovingly restored him, giving him new strength and purpose. Elijah was then called to anoint Elisha, a new prophet who would continue his work. Elijah's story is a powerful reminder that even when we feel abandoned or defeated, God is with us, offering us the restoration we need. Through the quiet moments of solitude, through the suffering, and through the trials, God is at work in our hearts, renewing our strength, our faith, and our courage. Pope Leo XIV emphasizes that in the later years of life, we may face seasons of hardship that feel overwhelming. The physical toll of aging, the loss of loved ones, and the challenges of navigating the later stages of life can feel like an insurmountable burden. But just as Job and Elijah found renewal through their faith, so too can we. Suffering, when faced with faith, does not have to be a dead end. It is often the pathway to a deeper understanding of God's love, a more profound sense of purpose, and the restoration of our spirits. In our own struggles, we are called to follow the example of Job and Elijah. Like them, we are not meant to stay in despair or resignation. Our faith in God can turn our trials into triumphs. The pain we experience can become the soil in which our faith grows stronger. Through suffering, we are not abandoned by God, but drawn closer to Him. And in that closeness, we find the courage to rise again, to continue our journey with renewed strength and a clearer purpose. Pope Leo XIV encourages us to see our aging years not as a time of decline, but as a time of renewal and restoration. The challenges we face are opportunities to draw nearer to God and to experience His transforming power in our lives. Just as Job and Elijah were restored through their faith, so can we find renewal in our own lives, even in the midst of suffering. God is always at work, refining us and preparing us for a future full of purpose, no matter our age. In the later seasons of life, when strength wanes and physical activity slows, prayer becomes one of the most powerful tools at our disposal. Pope Leo XIV speaks with great conviction about the power of prayer in creating a lasting, eternal legacy, especially as we grow older. Prayer, in the quiet years of aging, is not just a routine. It's a divine act that transcends time and leaves an indelible mark on the world and on eternity itself. One profound example Pope Leo XIV highlights is Anna the prophetess, a woman who lived in the temple, dedicating her entire life to prayer and fasting. The Bible tells us that Anna was elderly, having lived 84 years as a widow after the death of her husband. She could have chosen to withdraw from the world, to live in the quiet comfort of her age, but instead, she devoted herself to God in prayer, seeking His will day and night. Her faithfulness in prayer was so deep that when Mary and Joseph brought the infant Jesus to the temple, Anna immediately recognized the Messiah, even though he was just a child. Her prayers, offered faithfully for years, prepared the way for the coming of Christ, and she was among the first to proclaim his arrival. Anna's life exemplifies how prayer can create a legacy that reaches far beyond our own lives. In her old age, when many might consider their active service to be over, Anna became a key figure in the unfolding of God's divine plan. Through her devotion, her prayers echoed into eternity, influencing not just her generation but the generations to come. What a profound reminder this is. Our prayers, even in our later years, can have eternal significance. Pope Leo XIV calls us to recognize that prayer is not bound by age or physical limitations. Even when we may feel like we are no longer able to accomplish great things in the physical world, prayer is an act that connects us directly with the divine. Through prayer, we become co-laborers with God, participating in His work on earth. It is not just about our own needs, but about interceding for others, lifting up the world in our hearts, and trusting that God is at work through our petitions, even when we cannot see the immediate results. As we age, we might face the temptation to feel overlooked, as if our best years are behind us. But Pope Leo XIV emphasizes that our role in God's plan is far from over. Just like Anna, we have the opportunity to leave an eternal legacy through our prayer life. Our intercessions for others, whether for our children, our communities, or the world, hold tremendous power. Our prayers can bring healing, offer protection, and pave the way for others to encounter Christ. Prayer also nurtures our own spiritual growth, even in old age. It keeps us connected to God's presence, reminds us of His faithfulness, and deepens our trust in His plan. In the quiet of our prayer times, we are strengthened and renewed, not by our own might, but by the power of God's grace. Pope Leo XIV urges us to see prayer as a gift, a responsibility, and a privilege that allows us to be instruments of God's love and peace, regardless of our age. This powerful legacy of prayer does not fade with time. It only grows more precious and impactful. Every prayer we lift to God, whether for our loved ones or for the world, leaves an imprint on eternity. It is through our prayers that we continue to shape the world long after we have gone. The lives we touch through prayer are a testament to the unshakable power of a faithful life dedicated to God. So, as you reflect on your own life and the years that have passed, remember this: your prayers are powerful. They are not just for today, but for eternity. The legacy of faith you leave behind is not measured by the accomplishments of your hands, but by the impact of your heart, lifted up in prayer before the Lord. Just as Anna's prayers prepared the way for the Savior, so too can your prayers impact the lives of those around you and those who will come after you. Prayer is the eternal legacy you can build, a gift that will continue to bear fruit for generations. As we age, it's easy to become overwhelmed by the limitations that seem to come with time. The body weakens, energy fades, and sometimes we may feel as though we are no longer capable of making a meaningful impact. In these moments, we may begin to compare ourselves to those who are younger, more active, or seemingly more productive, leading us to believe that our best days are behind us. But Pope Leo XIV offers a powerful reminder. God's unique purpose for your life does not diminish with age or physical decline. In fact, the challenges of aging often provide opportunities for us to accomplish even greater things for God's kingdom. One of the most profound examples of living a productive life despite limitations comes from the Apostle Paul. When we think of Paul, we often remember him as a bold preacher, traveling from city to city, founding churches, and spreading the gospel. But as Paul grew older, his circumstances changed drastically. He was eventually imprisoned, confined to a small, dark cell, seemingly unable to continue his active ministry. His body, no longer able to endure long journeys or face the crowds he once did, was physically weakened. Yet, it was in this very prison, during his physical decline, that Paul wrote some of his most impactful letters, which would go on to shape the early church and inspire generations of believers. Despite his physical limitations, Paul's productivity did not stop. In fact, some of the most profound theological writings in history were penned from his prison cell. Paul used his time of confinement not as an excuse for inactivity, but as an opportunity to embrace God's calling in a new way. His letters to the churches, letters of encouragement, instruction, and exhortation, were sent out to believers who were scattered throughout the Roman world. These letters are now some of the most cherished books in the New Testament, serving as a foundation for Christian theology and practice. Paul's example teaches us that true productivity in God's kingdom is not measured by our outward actions or physical capabilities, but by our faithfulness in embracing God's purpose for our lives, no matter our circumstances. Even when life's limitations seem to close in on us, we are still called to be faithful stewards of the time, talents, and opportunities God has given us. Paul's prison letters are a testament to the fact that God can use us powerfully, even when we are physically constrained. In fact, sometimes it is in our limitations that God's strength is made most apparent. Pope Leo XIV urges us to stop comparing ourselves to others, especially those who seem to be more active or more visible in their ministry. It's easy to fall into the trap of comparison, but comparison is not the measure of success in God's eyes. Each of us has a unique calling and purpose that God has designed specifically for us. Whether we are young or old, healthy or infirm, the important thing is that we are faithful to what God has entrusted to us. God does not call us to imitate others, but to embrace the unique work He has set before us, right where we are. Even in the twilight years of life, there are countless ways to serve, to create, to encourage, and to build up the body of Christ. We may not be able to do the things we once did, but we can still do what God has called us to do in this season. Whether through prayer, writing, teaching, mentoring, or simply offering words of encouragement, there is no limit to how God can use us in our later years. Our bodies may age, but our ability to serve God and be productive in His kingdom remains steadfast as long as we are willing to answer His call. Paul's life serves as a powerful reminder that our physical limitations do not define our capacity for service or productivity. It is our faithfulness, our willingness to use the gifts God has given us in any season, that matters most. As Pope Leo XIV so beautifully reminds us, God's purpose for our lives is unique and enduring, transcending the limitations of age, health, and circumstance. So, let us embrace this truth. No matter where we are in life, God can still use us in powerful ways. Don't let comparison steal your joy or cause you to overlook the incredible opportunities in front of you. Instead, look to God and trust that He will use you exactly where you are, just as He used Paul in his prison cell. Your purpose is not over. You are still a vital part of God's plan, and the work He has for you to do is just as important now as it ever was. As we reach the later years of life, it's easy to begin thinking that our time to make a difference has passed. The world often sends the message that youth and vitality are the hallmarks of significance, and that after a certain age, our role in God's mission might diminish. But Pope Leo XIV urges those past the age of 65 to embrace their eternal mission, a mission that goes beyond time, beyond physical ability, and is rooted in the call to spread faith and love in the world. He emphasizes that even in our later years, we are called to bear fruit that will last eternally. You see, just because we have lived many years does not mean our mission has expired. In fact, Pope Leo XIV reminds us that this is when our calling may be at its most powerful. Age is not a barrier to being used by God. It is an opportunity to bear fruit that will endure, to plant seeds of faith and love that will continue to grow for generations to come. God does not measure our significance by the number of years we've lived, but by the faithfulness with which we live those years. Pope Leo XIV uses the metaphor of bearing fruit, rooted in the teachings of Christ, to remind us that our lives are meant to have an eternal impact. Jesus said in John 15 verse 8, "By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples." Bearing fruit is not just about doing good deeds. It is about living in such a way that our lives are a testimony to God's love, a reflection of His grace, and an offering to His kingdom. The fruit we bear is the legacy of faith we leave behind, the lives we touch with our love and compassion, and the way we serve others in his name. For those who have lived past 65, the opportunity to bear fruit is still abundant. Pope Leo XIV encourages those in this season of life to think not just about what they can achieve for themselves, but about how they can invest in others. It's not about how much energy we have left or how many tasks we can still complete. It's about using the wisdom, experience, and faith that we have accumulated over the years to leave a lasting impact. Your years of faithfulness have prepared you to influence others in ways you may not even realize. There are so many ways to bear fruit, no matter our age. Perhaps it's through prayer, interceding for the world, for our families, and for those who are struggling. Perhaps it's through mentoring the younger generation, passing on the wisdom of a lifetime of faith. It could be in sharing the love of Christ through small acts of kindness, offering a listening ear, extending a helping hand, or speaking words of encouragement. No act of love is too small to be significant in God's eyes. The fruit we bear is not just about the immediate effects of our actions. It is about the eternal impact we have on the lives of others, the seeds we plant in hearts that will grow over time, long after we are gone. As we age, our focus may shift from outward accomplishments to inward spiritual growth and service to others. But make no mistake, this shift does not mean we are any less important in God's eyes. On the contrary, this is the season where our fruitfulness can become the most profound. Like the palm tree in Psalm 92 verse 14, which bears fruit even in old age, we too are called to be fruitful, bearing the sweet fruits of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, and faithfulness, which will remain and continue to bless those around us for years to come. Pope Leo XIV reminds us that we are all on an eternal mission. Our mission does not end when our bodies begin to weaken or our energy begins to fade. In fact, it is in these moments of aging, when we are more dependent on God and more aware of the brevity of life, that we are given the opportunity to deepen our faith and bear fruit that is even more precious. Just as a tree's roots grow deeper over time, so too does our faith, and the fruits of that faith grow stronger, more resilient, and more enduring. This is the call to embrace your eternal mission, to see that God is not finished with you yet. He still has work for you to do, and He still wants to use your life to impact others. Whether it is through words of encouragement, acts of service, or simply living out your faith with love and integrity, you are called to bear fruit that will last forever. As Pope Leo XIV encourages, do not let the world's view of aging define your worth. Embrace your role in God's kingdom with renewed passion and purpose. You are not finished. You are still in the process of being used by God for His divine purposes. Your fruitfulness is not measured by physical productivity, but by the love and faith you pour out into the world. So, I urge you, embrace your eternal mission. Let your life continue to bear fruit that will endure through all eternity. The world needs your wisdom, your love, and your faith now more than ever. And when you stand before God, you will know that you have lived a life of purpose, leaving behind a legacy that reflects His glory for generations to come. As we grow older, it's common to find ourselves reflecting on the dreams and goals we once had but never fully realized. There can be a temptation to feel that the time for those dreams has passed, that the window of opportunity is closed, and that we are now simply waiting for the end. But Pope Leo XIV offers us a profound message of hope and renewal. Age does not limit your capacity for new dreams, nor does it close the door to a vibrant, meaningful purpose. In fact, it is precisely in our later years that God may be calling us to embrace new visions and to experience His promises of restoration and transformation. Pope Leo XIV encourages us to see that God's calling on our lives is not restricted by the number of years we've lived. In fact, God is the God of new beginnings, and just as He made all things new at the dawn of creation, He is constantly at work renewing and restoring us. The promise of restoration is not just for the young, but for all who are willing to embrace it. No matter how old we are, God's grace is sufficient to renew our hearts, revitalize our spirits, and give us the courage to dream new dreams. This idea of renewal is not just about physical restoration, but spiritual transformation. Pope Leo XIV reminds us that God's work in our lives is never finished. It doesn't matter how many years have passed, There are still dreams God has placed in your heart, still purposes to be fulfilled, and still a legacy to be written. It is in our later years that we have the opportunity to reflect on the richness of our experiences and use that wisdom to serve others in deeper ways. Just because the dreams of our youth may have taken a different form doesn't mean they are gone. Instead, those dreams can evolve, mature, and grow into something even more impactful as we age. God has a way of redeeming time. The Bible tells us in Joel 2 verse 25, "I will restore to you the years that the swarming locust has eaten." This promise is not just for those who are young, but extends to all who feel that time has been lost. Whether due to missed opportunities, unmet goals, or seasons of difficulty, God promises to restore the years that have passed, to redeem the broken parts of our lives, and to transform them into something even greater. His restoration is not a mere return to the past, but a transformation into something more beautiful, more purposeful, and more aligned with His will. Pope Leo XIV invites us to dream new dreams, even in the later stages of life. It's not a time to settle or to assume that your best work is behind you. It's a time to embrace the fresh vision that God may be stirring in your heart. The dreams you have today may look different from the ones you had in your youth, but they are no less important. Perhaps it's a dream to write, to mentor, to serve in new ways, or to create something that will leave an enduring impact. Whatever those dreams are, Pope Leo XIV encourages us to embrace them with faith and hope, knowing that God has equipped us for such a time as this. The examples in the Bible are filled with figures who experienced renewal and restoration in their later years. Think of Abraham and Sarah, who, in their old age, were promised a child, the very child who would carry the promise of God's covenant. Think of Moses, called at 80 to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, or Caleb, who, at 85, took possession of the promised land. God did not forget His promises to them because of their age. Instead, He worked through their lives in powerful ways, using their later years to fulfill His divine purposes. This is the message Pope Leo XIV wants us to hold on to. Your age does not disqualify you from God's best for your life. In fact, your later years are often a time when God does His most profound work, both in you and through you. You have lived through challenges, joys, losses, and triumphs that have equipped you with a unique perspective and wisdom. And now, in this season of life, you have the opportunity to use that wisdom to dream new dreams and to fulfill a purpose that glorifies God. Pope Leo XIV encourages you to allow God to restore the broken dreams of your past and to ignite fresh dreams that will bring glory to His name. Whether it's a dream to share your life story, to mentor the next generation, or to engage in new forms of service, God is not finished with you yet. His promises of renewal and transformation are as real in your later years as they were when you were young. In fact, it may be in your later years that your dreams take on their fullest, most meaningful form. Remember, God has not forgotten you. Your life is a canvas that He is still painting, and every stroke is purposeful, every color meaningful. Your best chapter is not behind you. It is unfolding now. So embrace the opportunity to dream new dreams, to live with renewed vision, and to know that God's promises of restoration are not just for the past, but for today and for the future. As long as you have breath, you are still a vessel of God's grace, and the dreams He has placed in your heart are still waiting to be realized. Let this be the season where your dreams, renewed and restored, begin to flourish like never before.